Thanks everyone for joining us today on this interesting and timely topic. Just our quick disclaimer, standard language, this presentation is for educational purposes only. It's not legal advice and it does not create an attorney-client relationship. We'll have some information at the end on contacting us if you have specific questions. Also, so you can get on with your day, we'll move through this information, somewhat quickly. So the agenda for today, a couple points. Who is Lizzo? What's her lawsuit all about? We'll discuss hostile work environment. We'll importantly discuss the steps to prevent a hostile work environment and the status of the Lizzo case or cases, just to give you a little bit of a tease there. So who is Lizzo? Well, she's an American rapper, singer, rapper, and a musician. Her real name is Melissa Vivian Jefferson. She's originally from Detroit, but she's made some stops along the way in Houston and Minneapolis. Some of her songs include Faded, It's About Damn Time, and Paris. And her music has been featured in a Target commercial. So she's really a very popular international star. What's going on with Lizzo? Why is she being sued? So a lawsuit has been brought by some former dancers and employees of Lizzo. Namely, the dancers are Ariana Davis, Crystal Williams, and Noel Rodriguez. There are allegations of sexual, religious, and racial harassment. There's also claims of disability discrimination, assault, and false imprisonment. Taken together, the dancers argue that these actions created a hostile work environment. So what exactly were the incidents where these claims arose from and that pooled together get into a hostile work environment? Well, the dancers alleged several ongoing issues during their employment with Lizzo. They said they were forced to engage in daily prayer, listen to coworkers discuss their religious beliefs regarding premarital sexual relations and other sexual acts, and listen to discussions of sexual encounters on a regular basis. In addition, there were some incidents at nightclubs in Europe. The dancers who brought this lawsuit went to the clubs and participated in activities that involved nudity and unwanted touching that they didn't want to do out of fear of losing their jobs if they didn't do as directed. Lizzo was reportedly present at these events and directed some of the behaviors. As a result of all this information taken collectively, these former employees have now brought claims against Lizzo, including hostile work environment. This may seem sort of counterintuitive, but first we're going to talk about what hostile work environment is not. You hear the term hostile work environment thrown around a lot. People bring it up all over the place in different scenarios. You see it on TV, but a lot of times individuals don't know the true meaning of the term hostile work environment in the legal sense, which is what we're going to talk about today. So with the general public's perception outside of the legal definition, the general public's perception of hostile work environment is really based on feelings more than something that could be actionable in the workplace. So what a hostile work environment is not is, somebody being mean, quote unquote, someone being aggressive, being a loudmouth, being a jerk, an employer making sure that employees are very strictly held to standards for completing tasks, strictly held to work rules and schedules, strictly held to production goals, receiving corrective action for failure to make those goals or follow those work rules. People think that's a hostile work environment. But those situations described on their own do not create a hostile work environment. So what actually is a hostile work environment? So it can involve repeated comments or jokes about a protected characteristic of an employee. So that would, examples would include their race, their gender, their sexual orientation, their religion, their ethnicity, their age, if they have a disability, anything that falls under a protected class. Displaying offensive symbols or pictures could contribute to a hostile work environment. Threatening or intimidating behavior can also lead to a claim of a hostile work environment. And then physical assaults or unwanted touching also are factors that could lead to a hostile work environment. But remember, to be illegal, hostile behavior must be targeted to employees with specific protected characteristics. Again, the bad behavior noted on the slide has to be directed at someone who is in a protected class. Again, that could be their race, their religion, their sex, their age, any of those items that fall under federal or state protected classes. If the behavior is directed at the individual because of the protected class, that's where you get into hostile work environment territory. A hostile work environment exists when the harassment is so severe and pervasive that it alters your ability to do your job. I mean, the behavior has to be more than just offensive. It must be objectively abusive. The harasser can be anyone in the workplace, including a supervisor, a coworker, or even a customer or client. The victim does not have to be the person harassed, but can be anyone affected by the offensive conduct. So for example, if you're in a group of employees having lunch every day, and there's one person that brings up comments of a sexual nature or directed at general people based on protected characteristics, even as a listener of that information, that could lead to a hostile work environment claim. To assess whether behavior is severe or pervasive enough to create a hostile work environment, the courts, when a claim comes, they're going to look at factors such as how often did the discriminatory conduct occur? Was the conduct directed at the individual because of their protected status? What type of conduct was it? Again, it could be jokes, symbols, any of that stuff. Would a reasonable person find the work environment hostile based on this conduct? So each case with hostile work environment is going to be fact specific. An employer should also be aware that courts have found that even one incident can support a claim of a hostile work environment. It doesn't have to be a number of incidents. So what are some examples of a hostile work environment? Forwarding an explicit email to coworkers, unsolicited, sending it out. Teasing a coworker about their race, their religion, their gender, a disability, their national origin, something along those lines. Hanging up an offensive symbol in a work area, or grabbing or otherwise touching a coworker's body. Many people watch the TV show The Office. It was on from about 2005 to 2011, something like that. In the show, the main character was the regional manager named Michael Scott, and he often engaged in behaviors that could result in a hostile work environment claim. For example, he made repeated jokes or comments about people's gender, their sexual orientation, their race, their national origin. Michael was a walking hostile work environment claim. The show was very popular because of some of those behaviors, because they were so outrageous and so cringeworthy that people almost couldn't stop watching. It was like a car accident happening in front of you. But in real life, if there was an individual, particularly a senior management person, who engaged in those behaviors in the way he did, the overall organization would have had that person fired. No question about it. Michael would have been on the hook and out the door. Importantly, employers need to really look at steps to prevent a hostile work environment. A lot of this stuff is common sense. In this day and age, most people know not to do things like this. However, not everyone follows the rules. Again, the example of the office. So here are some steps to prevent a hostile work environment claim from hitting your place of employment. Make sure the owners and management are not trying to be friends, in quotes, with subordinates. This is a huge area of hostile work environment claims where you've got a manager or maybe an owner of a business who is on the subordinate people to pal around with them, be friends with them. A lot of times when subordinates get into a situation with a supervisor, manager, or owner, they don't feel comfortable about reporting any bad activity because they fear they're going to lose their job, meaning they're going to lose their source of income. If they don't have a source of income, they can't pay their bills, they can't pay their rent or their mortgage, they might not have a place to live. So that is a huge area where hostile work environment claims can come from. A very important step for employers to protect themselves is to train your entire workforce. Have anti-discrimination and anti-harassment discrimination policies in place, whether that be in an employee handbook or in a standalone document. Those policies should include not only information regarding the policies and procedures, but how the supervisors should conduct themselves in the workplace and how they should respond to claims of harassment and discrimination. You want to have a reporting policy in place. Again, normally in an employee handbook, something along the lines of an open door policy that states an employee should immediately report any activities that could fall under the category of, harassment or discrimination that can lead to a hostile work environment claim. If you're the employer or the employer representative, you need to promptly and thoroughly investigate any complaints, again, of discrimination or harassment, which could also give rise to a hostile work environment claim easily. Often those claims are all lumped together. So if there's any report from an employee of something that could fall under the hostile work environment type of claim, discrimination, or harassment, that needs to be investigated by the company as soon as possible. And then the other action that needs to be taken is the employer needs to discipline or terminate someone if they, after investigating, find that improper behavior has occurred. That is a huge, huge step to protect every employer, is to look at these prevention steps and follow them. And it's got to be done in a pretty quick amount of time so that you're not letting things fester or you're ignoring things. You want to document everything that, document the reports, document the investigation, document the result, document any corrective action taken. That way, if somebody did try to file a claim down the road against the company's response would be, hey, we had policies in place, we investigated immediately, we took action, here's all our documentation. Those are the best steps to protect yourself. All right, so what is the status of the Lizzo case, or as I mentioned earlier, cases? The original matter that gave rise to this discussion is still ongoing. It could be settled, it could be dismissed. There's talk that Lizzo is going to bring counter suits or counterclaims against these dancers that we mentioned who are suing her. So that could continue to draw this case out, the primary case that we're talking about. Of interesting note is that Lizzo recently settled a pay dispute lawsuit with several dancers unrelated to this hostile work environment claim. But again, even if you're an entertainer, you have employees, and your job creates a workplace. And within that workplace, there can be claims, such as in the settled case of pay issues, wage and hour, or there can be disputes about the work environment, such as if things are happening that are negatively affecting employees and it's based on protected characteristics, that could get an employer, including an entertainer, into a hostile work environment claim situation. So the newest case was another new claim filed by a previous employee, also alleging similar claims to this current case that we're discussing today. So claims related to discrimination, harassment, hostile work environment. So we don't know what the real situation is, but it's interesting that all of these cases are coming out, and it's interesting that they're coming out against this particular well-known public figure in the entertainment business, kind of back to back to back. Whether that is people looking for a payday, whether there's actually a hostile work environment working for Lizzo, or whether it's something in between, that will all get worked out on the court system. And if the cases are settled, those settlements may be confidential and we might not know the answer to the question. So in summary, as an employer, the things that you want to consider are: don't hang out with your subordinates if you're a manager or owner. Have policies regarding harassment and discrimination. Take prompt action if a claim comes up. Remember, as we always like to say, compliance is not optional. If you have more questions and you're a client already, you can reach out to our portal. If you're interested in signing up for our services, our information is there. Thanks everybody for listening, and we'll be back next week with another presentation.